Hey guys, welcome back to the Guilty as Charged podcast. I'm very happy now to be joined by Chris Hayre, the team reporter. This is our second attempt at a little Zoom issue, but Chris, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
You know what, man? The first one was so good. I don't think I can top it with the second one. We'll try though. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, had a little issue downloading the Zoom recording, so we had to do this again. So can't thank Chris enough for taking the time out to join us twice in 2 days. Obviously, the draft wrapped up. It was last weekend. It seems like it was crazy for everyone involved. But what was that weekend like for you?
It was wild, man. Fast and furious. 9 picks. I think the first day was busy in that, we had a pre-draft party with LaDainian Tomlinson and Derwin James, Joey Bosa, Justin Herbert, my guy Francisco Pinto co-hosted it with me. It was a lot of fun. It was a good way to kind of kick off my favorite event on the NFL calendar. And then, it was a little surprising, frankly, to see Rashawn Slater still there at 13 overall. This is a guy that we talked about all offseason throughout this draft process. I didn't think he was going to get out of the top 10, honestly. But the way the board falls, sometimes you just never know. Chicago moved up to get a quarterback. Even with just 4 quarterbacks going in the top 12, the Chargers were still able to land the guy who I think many would say is a must need in 2021 and beyond at left tackle to protect Justin Herbert and open up some holes for that running game.
Yeah, I cannot say enough about how excited I am about Rashawn Slater being on the Chargers. And even with the kind of intel that suggested maybe 5 quarterbacks could go before the Chargers picked at 13, I never really thought that they would be able to get Rashawn Slater unless they traded up. So we kind of had this conversation in the deleted recording about Tom Telesco's patience and how he's been rewarded for, sticking and picking. Obviously gets Justin Herbert last year and Rashawn Slater this year.
Yeah, and he made a comment in one of his pressers that when it got to a certain point, I think it was like around 8 or something, that he had some pretty good intel that Rashawn would likely be there. And, it's a credit to the staff and the personnel in the Chargers organization to kind of have a good understanding of the board, what teams need, what teams are looking for, and to be able to stick and pick at 13 and to have that degree of patience. I think a lot of people would think that if you move up to get a left tackle, nothing wrong with that, especially in a year when you have 9 picks and you're going to have more picks next year with all the compensatory picks coming in for the Chargers. But they were able to stick at 13, get their left tackle. And you mentioned it, sticking at 6 last year, getting the offensive rookie of the year in Justin Herbert. So, Tom has had a track record of success in the first round. And for those who think it's easy to pick in the first round, go back and look. Yeah. Go back and look at past seasons and at some of the guys who are frankly not even in the league right now. As early as 2016, you look at some of these first round picks. So to get a defensive rookie of the year in 16, a first team All-Pro in Derwin James in 18, and then 2 years later get the offensive rookie of the year, and then get a guy like Rashawn Slater, who I know everybody's really high on. Tom and company have done pretty good in that first round.
Absolutely. And it's just been so interesting to see the kind of players that they've been able to get and not just select, right? But you have these awesome seasons. And, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts about why they've had this great track record, because, you could even go back to Jason Verrett, who was a Pro Bowler as a rookie. Derwin James was an All-Pro, obviously, and should have been, depending on who you ask, defensive rookie of the year. So why do you think the Chargers have had such success in the first round recently?
I think it's a combination of things. I think scouting first and foremost, and for those who say, oh, well, it's easy to pick Joey Bosa at 3 and it's easy to pick Justin Herbert at 6. Is it?
They weren't no-brainers.
Is it easy to pick Derwin James at 18, at 17 rather? I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say it's easy to pick a guy in the top 5 or 6, and then it's easy to pick a guy at 17 overall too, right? Or it's easy to pick Melvin Gordon and move up 2 spots. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler. You got Jason Verrett late in the first round. So I just think it's a combination of a lot of things, starting with that scouting staff. They do a fantastic job identifying guys that they think fit what the Chargers are, from a character perspective, from love of the game perspective, you got to love to play football. And, they got guys like Derwin James and Joey Bosa who love to play football. Smart, intelligent players like Justin Herbert. So it's a combination of factors, Stephen. And it's, again, I think Rashawn Slater is the latest example of that. Now we have to see this all play out on the field, but this is a guy who's highly intelligent. Talking to Duke Manyweather, who's trained him over the last 8 months, just talked about how clear he is, how consistent he is in everything that he does. And I just think it's all about the situation that Rashawn has gotten drafted into as well, in an offensive line room with so many vets, right, including Corey Linsley, the All-Pro center, Brian Bulaga. I mean, think about the experience that these guys have, that Rashawn gets to kind of pick those brains in the offensive line room.
Well, and not just Slater, right? Like Justin Herbert is now, working with this veteran-laden offensive group. And, we all know how smart he is, how intelligent he is. And then Rashawn Slater is the same way. I saw Pat Fitzgerald was asked about, like, well, what was his GPA like? And he was like, I can't tell you, but it was very high. So yeah, just the kind of intelligence that the Chargers are going to have up front, I think is going to pay dividends as well.
That's right. And also with this offensive staff coming in, I mean, Joe Lombardi comes from the whole Drew Brees, Sean Payton school. And we know how smart Drew Brees is and how deep that playbook went. I think we're going to see, I got a book behind me, this Payton and Brees book. For Chargers fans, I would suggest reading this. There's a chapter that's dedicated to Joe Lombardi in here. And it talks about just how deep the playbook goes, how complex it is, and how Drew Brees was able to master that. And I just look at some of the parallels with a guy like Justin Herbert, what he was able to do in his first year, and how he'll be able to pick up an offense quickly. And as he progresses throughout his career, he has the intelligence to really go deep in a playbook. And just think of everything he did last year on the fly, right?
Yeah.
And then think about that. And then having the weapons to do it with guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Eckler and all these guys. So I don't know. I would suggest you guys pick that up, read that this offseason. It's more homework as you educate yourself on this Chargers offensive staff.
I love that. That's a great call. I think Joe Lombardi, I think a lot of people were a little skeptical at first because of what he did or didn't do in Detroit, but I think it's going to be a great hire. He's got such a great reputation from working with the Saints. And I think just the kind of melding of minds that the Chargers have going on in the coaching staff is going to be so much fun to watch. Let's pivot to the second round pick. Another player I didn't really think that the Chargers would have a chance to get, but they stick and pick again, stick into their board, and they get Asante Samuel Jr. You've had the chance to interview him. You've had the chance to go over some film with Matt Miller. What can you tell us about Asante Samuel Jr. at this point?
I think it's a great pick. I didn't expect him to be there. Again, it goes down to that patience, but it was clearly a need in the secondary with guys like Casey Hayward leaving, and to have Michael Davis on one side, Chris Hayre Jr. returning, that veteran presence, Derwin James coming back. I think Asante Samuel Jr. is going to fit in perfectly. I said, how do you describe the way you play defensive back? Point blank, competitor, ball hawk. And, that's what Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley kind of echoed, is just the competitiveness that he plays with. He missed Derwin James by one season at Florida State, so he'll get to make up for that in the Chargers secondary this year. So you're looking at a secondary right now, Stephen, with, Michael Davis, who I thought played really well last year.
Yep.
Nas Adderley and Derwin James, who have not played in a game together, by the way. And I remember when Nas was drafted in the second round a couple of years ago, Daniel Jeremiah said that if you were to build a safety in a lab to complement Derwin James, Nas Adderley would be that dude. So we haven't seen that yet, so we'll get to see that hopefully for the first time this year. And then you bring in a guy like Asante Samuel Jr., who can get the ball. And if you want to make this team successful, you want to make the Chargers offense successful, get the ball for them, right? Get the ball for them. And that's what we missed last year by not having Derwin James on the field. That's what Asante Samuel Jr. is going to bring. Chris Hayre Jr., has brought that throughout his career. We remember that interception he had against the Raiders late in the year.
Exactly.
He didn't play last year. So there's a lot of guys in this secondary who can get the ball. Nas Adderley's another one who got the ball in Delaware. And in this new system, I'm really intrigued to see how he's going to play. So I think Asante Samuel Jr. is just another young piece in a secondary that I think can be very opportunistic in 2021.
Yeah. And, I'm just really excited to see the secondary come together. Right. And love the fact that the Chargers fans get to watch the number 26 go from Casey Hayward to Asante Samuel Jr. I think that is such a cool little thing, little detail. But we kind of talked in the last one about all these connections, right? So you get Asante Samuel Jr., who's connected to Derwin James, obviously connected to Trey McKitty, who he played with at Florida State, was high school teammates with Josh Palmer. Were you a little surprised, though, that the Chargers did, kind of go offensive playmaker in the third round instead of maybe addressing some of the other needs in Josh Palmer and Trey McKitty?
Not really, because you're not drafting for just 2021. I mean, you got to draft down the line. Right now, you have Keenan, you have Mike, you have a pair of undrafted guys in T. Billy and Jalen Guyton. I think a second year of Joe Reed and KJ Hill. It's all about competition too, frankly. You got to continue to add to a room. Josh Palmer's a guy who probably didn't have the best quarterback situation. And we've seen Justin Herbert elevate the play of guys who, frankly, you didn't really know much about in July of 2020. We didn't know much about Donald Parham or Tyron Johnson or Jalen Guyton or Gabe Neighbors. I mean, the list goes on and on of guys that he helped elevate the play of. Josh Palmer's a guy who could be, a future playmaker for this team. And, I'm talking about 2023, 2024, so if there's a guy you like that's on your board and you think highly of him, you got to snag him. So, you could talk about getting needs and, what's really a need. Like, of course, there's needs up and down the roster.
Right.
There could be injuries. Knock on wood, there's an injury in the wide receivers room. You're probably happy you got Josh Palmer in there. So I'm excited about him. I'm excited about Trey McKitty too. It's just, I look at that tight ends room now with Jared Cook, who has the most touchdowns, I think, over the last 3 years among tight ends other than Travis Kelce. Donald Parham, who it seemed like every reception he had was a touchdown last year.
Yeah.
Big dude, 6'8", and then another big guy in Trey McKitty who can block and also could be a playmaker potentially, who is also in a tough quarterback situation. So I'm excited about those guys, and I think Justin Herbert is too.
Absolutely. And lots of size in the tight end room, lots of versatility that they can play with there specifically. You kind of floated this question out on Twitter, of the day 3 players who could potentially be impact guys. So I want to get your thoughts there. There's been a lot of talk about Chris Rumph, maybe Brendan Hymas ends up starting. So what do you make of this day 3 class for the Chargers this year?
I like it. And I was encouraged by the responses because I think every single player was mentioned at some point, right? Whether it was Roundtree or Webb or Hymas or Rumph. So, Nick Nemus, a guy who I think can really add to that linebackers room and play special teams. And I think in the first interview, we talked a lot about just the versatility of some of these guys being able to contribute on special teams, because that's first and foremost what, I think all Chargers fans are going to expect from these guys on day 3 is making impact on special teams. I'm going to go with Chris Rumph, though, in terms of getting after the quarterback. Brandon Staley has had a very high success rate in getting the most out of his edge guys. And, you go back to Khalil Mack, go back to Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. To have Joey Bosa there and Uchenna, who I expect to get a lot more reps this year. You bring in Kyler Fackrell. Chris Rumph, talking to his co-defensive coordinator at Duke, Ben Albert, this week, he talked about the fact that he's just a Swiss Army knife. He can do a lot of different things. But if he can just get to the quarterback on third downs this year, that's a win, right?
Great,
Just continue to get after these quarterbacks in the AFC West. But you could make the argument for a lot of different guys. I know Popper made the argument for Webb. Just looking at Staley's secondary of defensive backs and what he was able to do with that unit with the Rams last year. So that's a good candidate. we don't know. Sometimes rookie running backs pop and they come out of nowhere and they star. Maybe Larry Rountree's that guy. If anything else, he can contribute on special teams, and he's going to add further competition to that running backs room with Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson. And then obviously Austin Eckler is all over the field. So I'm excited about a lot of these guys. Hymas, a lot of people were high on, and we're really happy the Chargers got him as late as they did. He adds that durability and versatility. I think he had 40 straight starts at Nebraska. So I think they project him as a guard, but has the ability to play tackle too. That's what I love about this line. All these guys can play different positions. So, knock on wood, if anything were to happen to, a guard or a tackle, there's some interchangeable pieces there.
Absolutely. I think the whole theme of the offseason for me has just been, flexibility and being able to, have the players to move around in different spots. And, you look at Asante Samuel Jr. play inside, play outside, same with Chris Harris. Offensive line you just mentioned with Brandon Hymas and Matt Filer and Ode Abuji. So flexibility has definitely been something that has kind of stood out to me. Last question here. It feels like from our perspective that the Chargers had, two primary objectives this offseason, which was A, upgrade the offensive line, and B, figure out special teams and try and get that right. Do you feel like they did a good enough job attacking those two priorities?
I think so, and obviously we don't know until we see it on the field on Sundays in September. Yeah. But you look at what they did across the offensive line; it's a completely remade unit outside of Bulaga, and then we got guys like Trey Pipkins still there in his third year. And I think a lot of people forget that Trey Pipkins came from a very small school 2 years ago. So this is a big year for him in terms of development and being a contributor across this offensive line. But I would say so. I mean, when you get the best center in football, you get arguably the best left tackle in the draft. You bring in veterans like Ode Abushi and Matt Filer. Filer's been a part of a program in Pittsburgh. He's never been a part of a losing season, I think, in his 6 or 7 years in the NFL. And then Bulaga, if he could stay healthy, we've seen the type of player he is. So offensive line looks good on paper. Special teams, I love our special teams coordinator, Coach Swinton. I mean, if you guys have not had a chance to hear him speak, just go back to the Chargers YouTube channel and go to his introductory press conference. You'll understand what I'm talking about. I'm really excited about him. And, the kicking game, there's going to be some competition there, which is a good thing. Yep. And, you bring in guys with your 9 selections that can contribute, so it all looks good on paper in the offseason, Stephen, right? I mean, I think the thing is all 32 teams have hope. All 32 teams think that they've upgraded in some form or fashion. I'm very confident in what the Chargers have done this offseason, but there's a variety of factors that go into a 2021 NFL season: staying healthy, execution, chemistry. There's so many different factors. So I'm really excited to see how it plays out. I've loved everything that Brandon Staley has said thus far, and I think he's going to walk the walk come July when these guys get out there for training camp.
Absolutely. Definitely a lot of palpable excitement for the Chargers. You guys have done a fantastic job covering everything on the YouTube channel and on social media.
Appreciate that.
Big week ahead as well with the schedule release. So what can Chargers fans look forward to coming from the social media team this week?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. The schedule release, it's funny because we know the opponents, but it's always fun to know exactly where we're gonna be throughout the course of a season. So we'll have some fun stuff coming from the Chargers digital accounts and Chargers.com this week. And then Chargers Weekly, I think I mentioned that Duke Manyweather talking about Rashawn Slater. It was a really, really good interview. I love Duke. Yeah. And hearing him talk about offensive line play, he had some really good insight on Rashawn Slater, and then also Ben Albert talking about Chris Rump II. So we'll continue to get more of these coach interviews up on Chargers Weekly next week and talk more about this schedule release. We'll break this down. I always love looking to see, because the Chargers are going to be in Philly, Baltimore, and Washington this year. So they're going to have quite a few East Coast trips. I'm intrigued to see what that's going to look like. Are they going to go back to back? in Baltimore, Washington, stay out there. Who knows? So it's always fun looking at the schedule. I know fans are excited about it.
And that would be great for you because you get to go back home, don't you?
Yeah, that would be nice. I'm looking at that schedule very quickly to see if I could book a trip and see family, go back to my old stomping grounds in Northern Virginia.
There we go. Love that. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Make sure you go check out those interviews with Duke Manyweather and the coach from Duke. So, Chris, can't thank you enough for joining us for the second time.
Steven, you know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen? You're going to find the first version before you post this one. And then you just have to make a decision.
Probably. Well, thanks so much, Chris. We really appreciate you, man.
You got it, bud.